So I'd now like to introduce Associate Professor J.R. Baker to come and speak with us next. He is the Chair of the Australian Social Prescribing Institute for Research and Education, which is otherwise known as ASPIRE. He's also an Associate Professor at Southern Cross University, CEO of Primary and Community Care Services, PCCS, and Director at the Bobby Goldsmith Foundation and Queensland Alliance for Mental Health. That's a lot of titles. Please welcome to the stage. Thank you for your talk, Associate Professor Baker.
Thank you. Jeez, feels like a TED Talk. It's a bit different. I'm used to hiding behind a podium. Thanks so much for having me today. I have to say it's heartening to hear throughout the first couple talks and Kevin's speech that theme of listening to people and designing things that work for them and having the system work for the person, not the person be part of the system. So I'll do my best to keep to time. I've been accused of breaking time rules many times. So social prescribing, it's been really lovely at the Parliamentary Inquiry into Loneliness. I heard it come up over and over again throughout the evidence given, and I've heard it multiple times today. And I heard it all weekend at the Intergenerational Conference that was in Sydney. So it's growing in terms of momentum, which is, exciting, but it also is really extra exciting because I don't have to talk as much on stages if everyone's doing it. So I don't really love going in front of people, but I do it out of love, if that makes any sense. So social prescribing is really about recognizing that health is a lot more than health, that a person's health is actually shaped by social, economic, and environmental factors. And social prescribing is really an attempt to try to integrate those factors into the healthcare system because funding throughout governments and throughout systems is always inherently siloed just because it's easier to manage things that are huge by breaking them into little chunks. And so social prescribing's job is to try to silo the entire sort of system of governments at every tier in some regards. And I say that because if you think about the things that make up health for somebody, sure, there's the healthcare, which is that little piece at the bottom of the picture, and there's also the health behaviors, which we've had some momentum in addressing. So you've heard about lifestyle medicine. Most people, I don't know, the 10,000 steps a day. You can think of lots of stuff that people talk about in terms of health behaviors around smoking cessation, watching how much you drink. But there's the rest of what makes up health. Where you live, are you next to a highway breathing in fumes? Are you in an idyllic estate with a tennis court that you get to play on every day? You know, those simple things. I don't have a tennis court. I'll just disclose that now. And do you have enough money to actually pay your bills? Do you have enough food on your table? Do you have friends in your life? So all those elements are hugely important. And so social prescribing doesn't actually, per se, address those other things like the health coaching element or the behavioral change components in its own right or complex case management like an add-on to social work, but it does ask what matters to a person. And then it also, in its best case scenario, should say you matter as a person. So it should ask people to find, what they're passionate about, what would make life more wonderful, how they could have a better day, week, month, year, and rest of their life, and then work towards elevating quality of life for that person and giving them the chance to actually be a participant in the community around them instead of a recipient of services and resources. There's lots of little building blocks of health. And so I suppose the more building blocks you have, the better. And I'll go off script a lot, but there's a lovely paper that I did with colleagues at Monash, and it was looking at cardiovascular incidents over 70. And it was just a little tiny finding was if you play games a couple times a week as a man, you're 20% less likely to have a cardiovascular incident. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we were told to play games so that we live healthier and longer? And if we avoid a cardiovascular incident, isn't it nice to get those years of life back to enjoy and to not actually put additional strains on our loved ones as caregivers? So the value proposition is really clear. It's much better to live a good life and to have the basic essentials in place than to actually have a long life that's not good. And that, from a government system perspective, it might be expensive, but from a human perspective, it's not enjoyable. It's tough, and it's just a bad journey. So social prescribing in its simplest is really about first noticing there's an unmet need. So on the left side of the picture, it's just really asking a trusted person, GP, pharmacist, or it could be someone in a church or a community leadership role, an elder. It doesn't matter. Someone actually notices that someone could have a better life possibly, and they might not be getting all the things they want. And it's really just an invitation to that person then to connect up with a link worker who's really supposed to get to the heart of what matters to that person. And so not to focus on what's the matter with the person, not their mental health conditions, or not the fact that they're caring for someone all week, but who they are and what they need. And then the link worker's job is really to co-design a plan with that person to get things that actually add the joy and the meaning and the important stuff and the practical stuff back into life. So it could be fun stuff, joining art society or playing sports. And mind you, those things have health benefits too. So, as we get older, sometimes we retreat into our houses. So getting out, walking, going to a library and doing a book club is still good for you. It's still good for your mobility. It's still good in terms of not worrying about frailty as much. Yes, there's a slightly higher risk of falling, but against the risk of disconnection and loneliness and isolation, it's immaterial. And so there's more practical things as well. I think Nick talked about accessing my-age care. Not always the easiest thing, and using it right, not the easiest thing either. And so in the Central Coast, you might get a package, but no one's going to come mow the lawn. There's no one available to do half the services in it anyway. So it's fine to get the funding, but you need someone to actually help you figure out how to make the most of it. So I think social prescribing, in essence, is really just trying to ask people, how can we add value to your life? And how can we help you add value to your life? Because it's very hands-off. It's all about what the person wants. And I would say it's not even patient-centered. It's person-led. Those are just some nice pictures, I suppose, of different social prescribing pilot programs across Australia. Some of it, I see the horses. Those were, I think, must have been out Durrell Way or Galston Way, so local to the area, but different ways that people get out and do stuff. So there's some communication skills, some horticultural skills, some arts and movie making and cooking, but there's also the practical stuff, which I'll come to in my case study. So does social prescribing make a difference? Yes. The first thing, and I think in some ways the best data set we ever had was looking at people who had a workplace injury. Because workers' compensation schemes in Australia give you much more data in terms of healthcare utilization. We don't have to worry about trying to get disparate sources of data. We can see how many physio appointments and how many GP appointments and how much it costs to actually fund an episode of care. And we saw within the workers' compensation environment that people with long-term workplace injuries, they stopped going to the doctor as much because they actually started looking after their care for themselves and felt in control. And just feeling in control makes a huge difference. They felt, reduced loneliness because they were active. They had more activities and groups they participated, so it wasn't surprising. And they felt more ready to work, which is not something we asked for. So I guess, it's good to have improvements in well-being and physical sort of health indicators and health-related quality of life. And it's good not to use health services if you can use social services. So social prescribing has a lot going for it. And in this region, some of the social prescribing work has had nice significant changes in reduced psychological stress, improvements in mental well-being, improvements in self-reported health, and health-related quality of life. That number doesn't look huge, 16%, but that's a decrement sort of thing. So if 0 is dead and 1 is perfect health, 16%, that's like 16% leveling up towards perfect health. That's actually quite nice. I would take that in 10 weeks. I probably need that. Side note. So not to belabor the history of social prescribing in Australia, but in some regards it's very long. First Nations communities have always taken a holistic approach to well-being and social and emotional well-being models. And in the Central Coast, again, I shouldn't give examples like that, but I've enjoyed going to the men's group at Eleanor Duncan Aboriginal Medical Service just because connection to culture, to country, to artifact, all that stuff is beautiful. But in this region, in the more recent history, 12, 13 years ago, with Health One funding, there were early trials. Kevin was talking about the iterations of divisions to Medicare locals to PHNs. So some of that early work was looking at addressing social determinants of health in this region. And then through other programs like Partners in Recovery, and now the Medicare mental health centers or the Head to Health sort of funds, people have had a chance to explore different uses of funding. And then through all the different funding buckets PHNs have, there's lots of opportunities to implement this sort of approach. About 5 years ago, there was a round table a first roundtable looking at social prescribing, which Consumer Health Forum and the RCGP and Macquarie University's Institute of Health Innovation, Australian Institute of Health Innovation pulled together, which was great. And there was 5 years later another one which ended up having a national consensus statement that 100 leading organizations, pharmacies, Pharmaceutical Society, private health insurance, RCGP, and then other things, defense, health. Anyways, there's lots of people. The short answer is lots of people see the value in it because lots of people realize we don't want to be a patient. We want to be a person who's living our best life. So PHNs have sort of a critical role in essence because when you think about social prescribing, you have assets in the community. It could be community groups, it could be sports clubs, it could be council activities, it could be stuff run by the local health district. And then you need to actually be able to have some mechanism in place though that can kind of sit across all these things and foster partnerships, a scaffold, a backbone, artificial reef, so to speak. And so PHNs have this unique ability to, one, look at regional needs and ask people what's happening and what matters in your region. And they can do that in partnership, obviously, with the LHD, but with councils and with community organizations and other partners. And ideally, a PHN then can use that to shape how they commission, but also how their colleagues commission services and fund things, and also work directly with the community to say, what do you want and what do you need? And so to build community assets that match those needs and to connect people to the assets that exist, that's a simple sort of backbone infrastructure role a PHN can support. Now to get into the sort of specific, I'm jumping backwards but forwards. So it's not always easy to have these conversations about what's happening for a person. It's much easier to take blood pressure. It's much easier to provide health sort of general education. It's much harder to ask about someone's ability to feed their family, or if they have suitable housing, or if they can even get to an appointment with a diabetes educator. So those sort of questions are not things that are comfortable, and they don't always fit in simple models of care, but they're important questions. And they're important because, just because we've talked about social determinants of health a couple times, you know, the 1.2 million hospitalizations a couple of years back now with associated diabetes, that's not all causal. So people might have, you know, probably 5% are actually diabetes is the primary sort of issue, but there's a lot of people living with diabetes and it's exacerbating their health conditions. But the rate of diabetes is much higher in low socioeconomic areas. And you know, part of that, if you look at some of the overseas studies, a lot of it's related to what you can buy near you. So if there's a lot more Maccas around you and it's expensive to get fresh produce, it's not surprising that your food choices aren't going to be the same. And so it's not per se health behaviors that are shaping it, but it's the thing we need to still try to shape to deal with the system that people live in. And then, of course, there's other risk factors. If you don't have enough money to pay your bills, you're going to be more stressed. If you're more stressed, a lot of people do simple breathing exercises if you know, but if not, it's the best breathing exercise is smoking a cigarette, and the next best relaxation activity is having a drink. So these things are, you know, all intertwined, and so you can't just address one thing, but it's different when people are moving towards a vision of what life, healthy, happy, full, sort of wonderful life looks like. So food insecurity is one area, oddly enough, in the US that they've been targeting because of the way some of the Medicare, Medicaid funding works. They can look at severe deprivation and try to get funding. So some of the health services have actually put food banks attached to them. Now, I don't think we need to attach a food bank to every single health service. I think having someone who can help you access the stuff you need, whatever it is the sort of simpler, easier to implement sort of solution. And everyone would love to have a coach, but it seems like executives get coaches and that's about it. Not many people can say, this is my goal, how do I get there? And then say, I don't know, how do you get there? And bounce back and forth. So that's an opportunity to be nice that everyone could have to figure out how their life could be more wonderful. And so I won't talk too much because I'm running out of time, but you know, prevention can sit lots of different places. It can sit at point of care when something's already happened, which is the bottom example. So if someone keeps going to emergency department for diabetes-related complications, yep, you can address some things at that point, link them into other groups. But the first thing you can do is primary prevention, which is have the conversation up front, which is, do you actually know how to prepare food? And that's not the words I would use, by the way, but I've never forgotten meeting this woman who had discovered mustard. And that was the best thing in the world. She had never cooked. Her oldest son was 16, never cooked. And then she discovered mustard, and she started cooking. And then he started cooking, and so did the youngest son, because one, she didn't even know mustard was a thing, honestly. They were just doing fast food every day. And two, she didn't know it was the most wonderful flavor in the world. And so that changed life, I think, for her, but also for the kids, because they got a new set of skills. And they actually had a decrease in their expenditure on food as well. I don't think I need to talk about all the things you can change, but in short, lots of stuff you could do. That's way too small a text to read. Sometimes people need transport. Sometimes people need access to funds, and sometimes people just need other people. So lots of things you can work with. So in closing, because I'm perfectly on time, PHNs sit in a really nice place to capture data. And social prescribing helps you capture even more data. Because when you ask how life could be more wonderful and what matters to someone, you find out a lot about what's missing. And so social prescribing sits there to see where regional needs are and where there's gaps in services. Because if you can't find somebody to link someone to, whether it's food, security-related stuff, or housing stuff, or whatever else it is, or even practical things, you can actually start building a map of what's missing. And so PHN is the sort of perfect place to integrate those different data points and to use the health-related data and the stuff from primary care and build that bigger picture. So in closing, I suppose, data is a big thing because people like evidence, but also being human-led is a big thing. And so social prescribing kind of can straddle those two things. It's entirely about what a person wants and needs, but it creates an opportunity to see where there's bigger social needs in the community. And it certainly takes pressure off the healthcare system. It reduces the number of appointments people have with their providers. It reduces the number of hospital attendances they have, but it also replaces those things with things that are much more joyful and bring better quality of life. And so it's very exciting to see this, the progress this PHN is making, and to try to create these very place-based local scaffolds to really ask people what matters to them, how life can be more wonderful, and then ultimately to give people a chance to contribute and remember that they matter in their own right. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Associate Professor Baker. That was wonderful. I think what was really profound about that to me, that talk that really stuck with me personally, was your comment that you move from, what matters to you as a person to you matter as a person. And I feel like, for me personally, in my life, I work a lot across health and aged care and home care, and we forget the care bit, right? Like we're about service delivery, we're about identifying need and matching services, or, it's very transactional. And what you spoke about was really that genuine curiosity and that conversation to get to know someone, to see someone, and to be there for them and help them make the most of this. To quote Sarah Wilson, this one wild and precious life. So thank you so much for that.